Rain splattered across the glass like impatient fingers, each drop chasing the other down to the sill. Lila Monroe pulled her jacket tighter, her heart already racing faster than the storm outside. She had never been late for anything in her life, but tonight it wasn't her lateness that worried her. It was his. She checked her phone again. No message, no call. 32 minutes since she'd arrived at Harper's Corner Cafe. Around her, cups clinked and steam hissed, but all she heard was the hollow ticking of the clock above the counter. She smiled nervously at the barista, lifted her cup, and whispered to herself, "Maybe he's just stuck in traffic." Her fingers brushed the handle of the cup, trembling slightly. She didn't usually do blind dates, not since her last heartbreak 2 years ago, but her friend Nora had begged her to give this one chance. "He's perfect for you, Lila," she'd said. "An architect, gentle eyes, widowed but stable. A good man." The word widowed had stuck in her mind. What did a heart like that look like up close? A sharp gust of wind pushed the door open, scattering rain and the smell of wet pavement into the room. And then came 2 small voices. "Excuse me, miss, are you Lila Monroe?" 2 little girls stood at the doorway, soaked, breathless, identical. One held a pink umbrella that had collapsed inward, the other clutched a stuffed rabbit by its ear. Their big blue eyes blinked up at her with equal parts courage and worry. "Yes," Lila said, setting her cup down. "I'm Lila." "Are you lost?" The older one, by maybe 2 minutes, shook her head. "We're not lost. We're looking for you." The cafe went quiet in that curious way it sometimes does when something odd happens. A few people glanced up, smiled softly, then went back to their lattes. Lila crouched down. "Looking for me?" "Why?" The smaller twin straightened her raincoat. "Because our daddy couldn't come." "He's at work. He said he's sorry," Lila blinked. "Your daddy?" Both girls nodded, and the older one added proudly, "His name's Evan Cole." It took a second for the name to click. Her heart gave one surprised flutter. The older girl said quickly, "He told us about you. He said you were nice and that he was really nervous. But then he got a call about something wrong at the bridge site, so we came instead." Lila laughed, startled. "You came instead?" "Uh-huh," said the younger one. "Because we didn't want you to think he forgot." For a moment, Lila didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or call the police. But then she saw it, the mixture of bravery and hope in their faces, like 2 tiny messengers trying to rescue a broken evening. She exhaled softly. "You 2 are very brave," the girls grinned. "We know. Do you want to sit down?" "You must be freezing." They nodded, sliding into the booth across from her, swinging their legs that didn't yet reach the floor. The waitress came over with 2 mugs of warm milk before Lila even asked. She'd been listening. As steam curled from their mugs, the twins started talking, fast, overlapping, unstoppable, about how their mom used to make Sunday pancakes shaped like butterflies, about how their dad learned to braid hair by watching YouTube videos, about the treehouse he built in the backyard and how he called it Mommy's Angels. Lila found herself smiling, laughing, even leaning forward without realizing it. The girls spoke with the honesty that only children have, the kind that tears through politeness and lands straight in your heart. When they told her their mom had died suddenly from a brain aneurysm, the words hit like a quiet thunderclap. The older girl's voice trembled just a little, but she kept talking, filling the space with stories of how their dad sang lullabies and made grilled cheese shaped like stars so they wouldn't cry at night. And Lila thought, what kind of man raises this much light out of that much darkness? They told her they'd begged their babysitter, Mrs. Parker, to bring them here. "Because Daddy hasn't smiled for real in a long time," the younger one said. "We thought maybe if you met us, you wouldn't cancel him." Lila laughed through the lump in her throat. "Cancel him? Oh no, I wouldn't do that." The girls looked at each other, triumphant. Outside, the rain softened to a whisper. The cafe lights glowed warm and golden. For the first time in months, Lila felt like the world had slowed down just enough to breathe. When their mugs were empty, the older one leaned forward seriously. "Miss Lila, do you like Chinese food?" "Sure," Lila said. "Why?" "Because Daddy's favorite is from the Golden Lantern place, and we could bring him some." "You could come too." The invitation landed in her chest like a spark. Every cautious rule she'd made about dating, every wall she'd built, seemed to tremble just a little. She smiled softly. "You think he'd like that?" Both girls nodded hard. "He'd love it." Lila glanced at her watch. She should have been home an hour ago. She should have said no, but instead she found herself asking the waitress for takeout boxes and listening to the twins argue about whether their dad liked sesame noodles more than sweet and sour chicken. When they finally bundled up and headed toward the door, the younger one turned back and said, "He's going to be so surprised." We saved his date. And as the door closed behind them, Lila felt a quiet thrill move through her. Saved his date. The words made her smile all the way to the car. If you're enjoying this story so far, don't forget to tap the like button and subscribe. It helps stories like this reach more hearts just like yours. The drive to the construction site felt longer than it should have. The twins chattered in the back seat, pointing out every car that looked remotely like their father's, while Lila tried not to think too hard about what she was doing. She'd known Evan Cole for exactly 0 minutes, yet here she was, carrying Chinese takeout in a paper bag and ferrying his daughters through the night rain. Her sensible self kept whispering, "You're insane?" But her heart, reckless and quiet, replied, "Maybe this is what second chances look like." The site appeared at the edge of town, floodlights slicing through the drizzle. Giant steel beams rose from the ground like unfinished thoughts, and the smell of wet cement hung in the air. The twins spotted him first. "Daddy." Lila followed their gaze and saw a man standing under a half-built awning, talking rapidly to 2 engineers. His yellow hard hat gleamed under the rain. When he turned at their voices, his expression went from confusion to disbelief in a heartbeat. "Girls," he shouted, half running toward them, "what on earth are you—" Then his eyes lifted to Lila. For a moment, everything around them, the wind, the rain, even the crackle of the generator, fell away. He was taller than she'd imagined, with eyes that seemed both kind and tired, and the sort of presence that carried calm like a secret. The kind of calm only people who've survived storms can hold. "Mr. Cole," Lila began, holding up the takeout bag, "your daughters decided to save your date." His lips parted, then curved into the smallest, most embarrassed smile. I'm so sorry. You didn't have to." "She wanted to cancel," the younger girl piped in, "but we told her you were nice." Lila laughed, shaking her head. They were very persuasive. He crouched to hug them, his jacket soaking through as they wrapped their arms around him. "You two are grounded for life," he said softly, kissing the top of their heads. "Grounded means hugs, right?" one of them asked innocently. He sighed, smiling. "Something like that." When he stood, he met Lila's eyes again. "I can't believe they dragged you here. This must be the strangest first meeting in history." "Maybe," Lila said, "but it's memorable." He took the bag from her hands, their fingers brushing briefly, warm skin against cold rain. "Thank you for not running away." "I almost did," she admitted, "but they made it hard." He laughed softly. "They make a lot of things hard to resist." They all stood under the awning as thunder rolled in the distance. The twins opened the food and started passing out chopsticks like it was a picnic. Someone from the site whistled teasingly at Evan. He pretended not to hear. "So," Lila said, sitting on a low beam, "you're an architect." "Structural engineer," he corrected gently. "We're reinforcing the bridge foundations." One of the sensors gave a bad reading, so I had to come fix it. She nodded. Sounds intense. It is, he said, looking out at the half-lit site. But after losing my wife, it became a way to stay busy. Keep my hands full so my heart doesn't notice the empty spaces. The way he said it wasn't self-pity. It was quiet truth, the kind that made people lean closer. Lila wanted to say something comforting, but the twins beat her to it. "Daddy, tell her the story," one said. He raised an eyebrow. "What story?" "The one about Mommy and the bridge." He sighed, smiling faintly. "They never forget anything." He looked at Lila again, rain dripping from the edge of his hard hat. "My wife and I met on a bridge almost like this one. I was still in college. She was taking photos for an art project. We both reached for the same coffee cup at the vendor's cart, spilled it everywhere, and she said it was the universe trying to draw attention to itself." Lila smiled softly. "Sounds like something I'd say." She used to say that life doesn't just happen to us, it asks if we're paying attention. A gust of wind swept through the site, carrying the smell of wet steel and jasmine from the nearby river. For a long moment, none of them spoke. Then the younger twin yawned. Lila checked her phone, 10:46 p.m. Evan looked down at his daughters, now slumped sleepily against each other. "I should take them home." "Of course," Lila said, standing. "Thank you for the story." "Thank you," he said, his voice low but steady. "Most people would have walked away the second they saw two drenched children in a cafe." She smiled. "I almost did, but they had something I couldn't ignore." "What's that?" "Faith," she said simply. He looked at her for a moment longer than necessary, and she thought she saw something shift in his eyes, something old giving way to something possible. When he turned to strap his daughters into the car, she felt a strange ache in her chest. Not sadness, just the unfamiliar tug of a story that wasn't finished yet. Before she could leave, he called out, "Lila." "Yes." "Maybe next time without the rescue mission." She laughed. "I'd like that." "Tomorrow?" "Tomorrow?" The rain had stopped when she got home. The world felt oddly lighter, as if something had exhaled. She placed her damp coat on the rack, looked at her reflection in the hallway mirror, and smiled. For the first time in a long while, her eyes looked like they were waiting for sunrise. If you're still listening, don't go anywhere. What happens next will change everything for Lila and Evan, and you won't believe how one phone call turns their quiet spark into a storm. If you haven't yet, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. Would you have gone with the twins to meet their dad? Morning sunlight slipped through the blinds like shy fingers testing the room's warmth. Lila stood in front of her wardrobe holding two options, jeans or a floral dress, and realizing she hadn't felt this kind of nervous excitement in years. She whispered to herself, "It's not a date, just breakfast. Pancakes, with a man and his children." Then she laughed. "Oh, who am I kidding?" Her phone buzzed, a message from Evan. "Good morning, Dr. Hart. Pancakes are on at 9. The girls insisted I remind you twice. Bring your favorite syrup." Lila smiled, tucking a small bottle of maple syrup into her bag as if it were a lucky charm. When she arrived, the Cole residence looked like something out of a painting. Warm brick, creeping ivy, and a porch swing that swayed gently in the breeze. The front door opened before she could knock. "Dr. Lila," the twins shouted in unison. They were both still in pajamas, one wearing a superhero cape and the other a tiara. "Good morning, my little conspirators," Lila said, laughing. "Did you sleep well after your adventure?" "We dreamed about noodles." Daisy, no, wait. Evan had called her Harper, announced. Her sister Hope added proudly. "And Daddy snored like a bear." From the kitchen, Evan's voice floated out, low and amused. "That's classified information, ladies." Lila followed the smell of coffee and butter into the kitchen. Evan stood at the stove flipping pancakes with surprising finesse. He was wearing a light blue shirt, wrinkled but clean, and a look that was somewhere between calm and anticipation. "Morning," he said, glancing up. "You made it." "I wouldn't miss it. You've got quite the sous chefs, only if you don't mind a few chocolate chips in your pancakes." "I'd be offended if there weren't," she teased. The girls scrambled into their seats, giggling as syrup dripped onto the table. Evan poured coffee into 2 mugs, handing her one. His fingers brushed hers, and that small touch made her heartbeat stumble. "So," he said, leaning against the counter, "I owe you an apology." "Again." "For last night." "Don't," she replied. "If you hadn't missed the date, I wouldn't have met your daughters. And honestly, I think they're better company than most men I've had coffee with." He chuckled. "That's not saying much for me, then." "Oh, I'm reserving judgment," she said with a playful glint. The twins exchanged glances like 2 tiny matchmakers watching their plan unfold. After breakfast, Harper tugged Lila's sleeve. "Do you want to see our secret place?" Evan hesitated. "Girls—" "It's okay," Lila interrupted softly. "If they're offering, I'm honored." The twins led her through the backyard to a towering oak tree. At its center was a small wooden staircase, winding up to a hand-built treehouse with a carved sign above the door. "Mommy's Angels." Her breath caught. "You built this?" Evan nodded, joining them at the base of the tree. "After we lost Mia, I needed something to keep my hands moving." The girls helped paint the inside. It's full of her drawings. Lila climbed the steps slowly, her hand brushing the smooth railing. Inside, the space glowed with soft light. There were fairy lights, plush toys, and a framed photo of a smiling woman, Mia, with the twins perched on her lap. "Mommy used to sing up here," Hope whispered. "Daddy says the tree still remembers her voice." Lila blinked back tears. "She must have been wonderful." "She was," Evan said from the doorway. His voice was quiet, full of weight and warmth. "She taught music at the elementary school. Loved sunflowers and storms. She made life brighter." Lila turned to face him. "You talk about her like she's still here." He nodded slowly. "In a way, she is. Every note they hum, every story they tell. She's still here." For a while, there was only the sound of the wind through the leaves. Then Harper giggled. "Daddy, are you gonna marry Dr. Lila?" "Harper," Evan exclaimed, flustered. "We just met." Lila burst into laughter, her heart light again. "Let's give your dad time to panic, okay?" The twins giggled harder. Evan shook his head helplessly. Later, while the girls painted outside, Evan and Lila sat on the porch. The sun had risen higher, casting a warm gold hue over the lawn. "Thank you for being kind to them," Evan said quietly. "They've had a hard time trusting people since— well, you don't have to thank me," Lila said. "They're wonderful. Brave, too. They remind me of the kids I treat at my clinic, always finding joy in the smallest things." "You're a vet, right?" She nodded. "Mostly dogs and the occasional stubborn goat. I guess I just like helping things heal." He smiled. "Then you picked the right breakfast table." For a moment, neither of them spoke. There was a soft hum in the air, something tender and unspoken passing between them. Then Evan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it and frowned. "It's work again." Lila watched his face change, tension returning to his shoulders. "Bad news?" "One of the support beams at the site. There's been a shift." "They need me there in an hour." "Go," she said gently. "Your world doesn't pause for pancakes." He looked at her with quiet gratitude. "Can we try again? Dinner this time?" "I'd like that," she said, "as long as your coworkers don't steal you first." He grinned. "No promises." When he left, the twins waved wildly from the porch. Lila stayed a little longer, helping them rinse paintbrushes and feed the family cat. She couldn't remember the last time a Sunday morning had felt so alive. As she drove home, she caught herself smiling at nothing. The kind of smile that comes when something real begins, small, gentle, and terrifyingly beautiful. But just as the scene seemed too perfect, her phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Evan. It was a number she didn't recognize. Dr. Hart, this is the county safety office. There's been an incident at the coal construction site. You were listed as an emergency contact. Her heart stopped. The steering wheel trembled in her hands. Evan, she whispered, her voice breaking. Please, no. If you're still here, stay with me. What happens next will break your heart and piece it back together in ways you won't forget. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. The next chapter will leave you speechless. The sound of sirens isn't something you ever forget. Even years later, Lila would swear she could still hear them when she closed her eyes, that high, trembling pitch cutting through everything, including reason. By the time she reached the construction site, the place was a frenzy of flashing lights and voices. Rain had started again, a cold drizzle that made everything blur into streaks of red and blue. She barely parked before jumping out. Evan, she called, pushing past the crowd of workers and paramedics. Where is he? Please, Evan Cole. A foreman recognized her. Ma'am, he's fine. He's over there with the medics. Lila's heart didn't believe the words until she saw him. Evan sat on the back of an ambulance, his shirt torn, a shallow cut bleeding just above his eyebrow. He looked stunned, pale, his hands shaking slightly as a paramedic cleaned his wound. When he saw Lila, his eyes widened. Lila? She exhaled sharply, her knees almost giving out from relief. Oh, thank God. He stood instantly, despite the medic's protest. It's nothing. A beam slipped when one of the supports gave out. I pushed Sam out of the way, just got grazed by debris. She reached him, her voice trembling. You scared me half to death. He gave a weak smile. Guess I'm consistent with bad timing. Not funny. He sighed, his face softening. No, it's not. For a long moment they just stood there in the rain, her eyes searching his face, his gaze heavy with unspoken things. Finally, she whispered, Why was I your emergency contact? He hesitated. After last night, I realized you were the first person outside my family who cared where I was. It just felt right. That broke her. The fear, the worry, the fragile connection they'd been tiptoeing around. It all came crashing down in tears she couldn't stop. Evan pulled her close, his arms wrapping around her trembling shoulders. The world seemed to fade. The noise, the flashing lights, everything but the simple human truth of one person holding another because words weren't enough. The paramedic cleared his throat softly. Sir, we'll need you to get that stitched. Evan nodded. Yeah. Okay. He turned back to Lila. Will you come with me? Just until the girls get here? Of course. At the hospital, the adrenaline had worn off, leaving exhaustion and quiet. Evan lay on the bed while a nurse stitched the cut above his eye. Lila sat nearby, holding his jacket in her lap, her fingers tracing the edges absently. Does it hurt? She asked. Only when I move my face. Then stop moving it. He smiled, carefully this time. You're bossier than I expected. I'm a veterinarian, she said. Bossiness comes with the job. The nurse chuckled and excused herself. Silence filled the room again. Heavier this time, full of the kind of questions people are afraid to ask too soon. Finally, Lila said softly, You could have been killed. I know. And you're acting like it's just another Tuesday. I can't afford to fall apart, Lila. Not with them depending on me. She leaned forward. But you don't have to keep patching yourself with work. Grief doesn't go away because you keep moving. He looked at her then, really looked, as if seeing her for the first time. "How do you know that?" "Because I tried," she whispered. "My fiancé died 3 years ago in a car crash. I buried myself in my clinic for months, thinking if I worked enough hours, I could outgrow the ache. But it doesn't work that way." His breath caught. "I didn't know." "You weren't supposed to," she said gently. "But maybe that's why I didn't walk away last night. Maybe I recognized the same silence in your eyes." The room went still, the kind of still that makes every heartbeat echo. Evan reached for her hand, his thumb brushing over her knuckles. "You make it sound like pain recognizes pain." "Maybe it does," she said, "but healing recognizes it too." A tear slipped down his cheek, unbidden, quiet. She didn't wipe it away. She just let it fall. Some tears need to land before the story can move forward. The twins burst into the room minutes later, their faces blotchy from crying. "Daddy!" Evan opened his arms wide. They climbed onto the bed, hugging him so tightly the monitors beeped in protest. Hey, I'm okay," he murmured, kissing the tops of their heads. "Just a little bump." Lila stood back, watching, heart full and aching at once. When Harper looked up and spotted her, she smiled. "Dr. Lila?" "You came." "Of course I did. Couldn't let your dad have all the fun." Evan glanced at her, and in that moment, something deep and wordless passed between them. Not romance yet, not comfort exactly, but something sacred. Shared survival. Later that evening, after the twins were asleep and the house had quieted, Lila stayed a while longer. She made tea, tucked a blanket around Evan, and watched the rain fall outside the window. "You really didn't have to stay," he said softly. "I know," she replied, "but I wanted to." He smiled faintly. "You keep showing up." "Maybe that's what we both needed," she said. "Someone who stays." He looked at her like a man standing in front of something rare, fragile but real. "Lila, thank you." She shook her head. "You don't have to thank me. Just heal." For them, he nodded, eyes heavy with exhaustion. "For them, and maybe for you." She smiled. "We'll see." The lights dimmed, the rain softened, and somewhere between fatigue and peace, Evan drifted into sleep. Lila watched for a while longer, her voice quiet as if she were speaking to herself, but also to every heart listening beyond the screen. Sometimes life doesn't give us perfect beginnings. It gives us broken moments and asks us to love anyway. If this story has touched you so far, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps keep these stories alive. Tell me below, have you ever met someone who made your pain feel a little lighter? The rain had stopped the morning. Evan opened his eyes without pain for the first time. Sunlight filtered through the white hospital curtains, landing across his bandaged hand. Lila was sitting by the window, her hair loose for once, sketching something on a paper napkin, something she quickly folded when she noticed he was awake. He smiled weakly. "You've been here all night again, haven't you?" She tried to look casual. "Just making sure you don't run away before the doctor clears you." "Where would I even go?" he teased. Then his tone softened. "It's strange. I keep waking up hoping to see you first." Lila's fingers hesitated on the napkin. "That's because I'm noisy. You'd miss the silence otherwise." They both laughed, and for a second, the sterile room felt like a home. Days passed, and the rhythm of healing became theirs alone. She brought books. He told her stories about the town he grew up in, small, quiet, near the sea. Sometimes he would close his eyes mid-sentence, and she'd keep speaking softly so he wouldn't feel the silence grow heavy again. When he was finally discharged, the twins ran down the corridor to hug him, nearly knocking his crutches aside. "Daddy Evan, you can walk again," shouted Maya. He looked at Lila, startled. "Daddy Evan?" She flushed. "They came up with it." "I tried to stop them," He knelt, smiling. "It's okay. I kind of like it." Outside, the air smelled of fresh leaves and the city beginning again. Evan's small cottage sat at the end of a lane lined with wildflowers. It looked too quiet until Lila and the twins filled it with chatter, arranging flowers on the table, boiling tea, making plans he hadn't realized he wanted. Later that evening, while the twins watched a cartoon, Lila found him on the porch, staring at the sunset. "It's beautiful," she whispered. He nodded. "I almost forgot how color feels when you're alone." She leaned against the rail. "You're not alone anymore." The space between them warmed with words left unsaid. Then one of the twins shouted from inside, and the moment drifted away like smoke. That night, after they left, Evan sat with the small napkin drawing she'd once hidden. It was of him, sleeping peacefully, surrounded by wildflowers. He folded it carefully and placed it inside a book. Weeks passed, and the quiet friendship turned into something deeper, neither of them named. He began stopping by her apartment on Sundays, bringing breakfast for the twins. They'd paint, laugh, spill juice, and every smile Lila gave him felt like sunlight he didn't know he needed. One rainy afternoon, the power went out. The twins were away at a sleepover, and Lila invited him to stay for dinner. Candlelight danced between them, and outside thunder rolled across the sky. "You know," she said softly, "before that night on the road, I was planning to leave this city. I thought maybe starting over somewhere else would make the noise stop." He looked at her across the candlelight. "And now?" "Now," she whispered, "I don't want to leave anymore." The silence between them wasn't awkward. It was alive, filled with everything their hearts were saying, but their mouths weren't brave enough to speak. He reached across the table, his hand brushing hers. She didn't pull away. For the first time since her husband's death, she didn't flinch from touch. Then, almost shyly, he said, "I keep thinking, maybe that accident wasn't meant to end something. Maybe it was meant to begin something." Her eyes shimmered in the candlelight. "Evan," he smiled faintly. "It's okay. You don't have to say anything, just thank you for staying." When the thunder faded, they stood side by the window, watching raindrops trace slow paths down the glass. She rested her head against his shoulder, and in that stillness they both knew that healing sometimes arrived quietly, without promises, without declarations, just two people learning how to breathe again. The days that followed carried a quiet rhythm. He helped fix the cafe sign near her apartment. She helped him paint the small garden fence at his cottage. Every little gesture said what their voices couldn't, and yet, even as happiness bloomed, a shadow lingered, something from Evan's past that he hadn't told her. Late one evening, she found him staring at an envelope in his hands. "What's that?" she asked. He folded it quickly. "Nothing important, just something from before the accident," but she saw the tremor in his fingers. "Evan, if you're hiding something, tell me. We've come this far together." He hesitated, torn. Then he said quietly, "It's a letter from the driver who hit me. He survived, too. He's asking to meet." Lila felt the air leave her lungs. "You never told me he was alive." "I didn't want to make it real," he whispered, "but I think I need to see him. To forgive him, maybe. To forgive myself." The next morning he left early. She watched from her window, her heart heavy with something she didn't yet have a name for. If you're still here, thank you for listening. Stories like this remind us that forgiveness and love often grow from the same soil. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if you're feeling this journey. Your support helps bring more stories like A Date They Saved to life. The cafe was nearly empty that afternoon when Evan stepped in to meet the man who had changed his life. The soft hum of the refrigerator filled the silence, and every sound felt too loud. At a corner table sat a man in his 40s, nervously twisting a ring around his finger. His name was Daniel. When their eyes met, neither of them moved for a long moment. Then Daniel stood, voice trembling. "Evan, I didn't think you'd come." "I almost didn't," Evan replied, "but I couldn't keep running from the memory of that night." They sat across from each other, two strangers bound by a moment neither could forget. The silence stretched until Daniel spoke again. "I was drunk," he confessed, tears slipping down his cheeks. "I lost control of the wheel, and I've lived every day wishing I could undo it. I wrote to you hoping you'd yell at me, hit me, something. But you came here calm." Evan's jaw tightened. "I've been angry for months, but anger didn't fix my leg. It didn't heal what I lost. So I thought maybe forgiveness could." Daniel's head dropped into his hands. "You're a better man than I deserve to meet." "No," Evan said softly, "just a man who's tired of carrying pain." The conversation lasted less than 30 minutes, but when Evan walked out of that cafe, he felt lighter, like a door he'd kept locked inside his chest had finally opened. He didn't notice the soft drizzle until it soaked his shirt, and for the first time in a long time, he didn't mind the rain. When he reached home, Lila was waiting by the porch, her face pale from worry. "You should have told me you were going," she said, voice shaking. "I was terrified something might happen." He smiled faintly. "Something did happen. I forgave him." She stared at him, the wind tugging at her hair. "You really did?" "I had to," he said. "Otherwise I'd never move forward, with anything. Not even with you." The last words hung in the air like a confession. She blinked, her lips parting slightly, unsure what to say. Then, after a heartbeat, she whispered, "I've been waiting for you to say that." For a moment, time held its breath. Then, almost shyly, she stepped closer, her hand brushing his. The world narrowed to the sound of rain and their joined hands, two people who had walked through storms and found calm in each other's silence. That night, as thunder rolled far away, the twins slept at her mother's house, and Lila and Evan sat by the window, watching the rain again. This time there was no fear in it, just peace. "I used to think the sky only cried when something ended," she said softly. "But maybe it rains when something new begins." He smiled. "Then let it rain." They didn't need promises. They didn't need forever. They had that moment, real, fragile, enough. Over the next weeks, everything seemed to breathe again. The cafe where they first met reopened after renovation, and Evan surprised her by renting the small art studio beside it. "For you," he said, "for your sketches and the kids' laughter." She laughed through tears. "You don't even know how to stop making me cry, do you?" "I just want to give you reasons to smile afterward," he said. And he did. Every morning, every shared meal, every small miracle of ordinary days that felt extraordinary, simply because they had survived to live them. But one evening, when the sun slipped low over the town, Evan received a call that changed everything again. His doctor wanted him to come in immediately. There had been new findings from his last scan. The fear that washed over him was sharp and cold. Lila saw it the moment he walked into her apartment. "What is it?" she asked. He hesitated, trying to sound calm. "The doctor found something. Another clot. They need to operate." Her hands flew to her mouth. "Oh God, Evan." He reached for her shoulders. "Hey, I'm going to be fine. I just need you to believe." That tears welled in her eyes. "You promised me peace. And you'll still have it," he whispered, "because you'll carry it for both of us." That night was the longest of her life. She waited in the hospital corridor again, just as she had the first time. The same white walls, the same clock ticking too slowly. But this time she wasn't just worried for a stranger. She was waiting for the man who had quietly become her heart. When the surgeon finally walked out, Lila stood before he spoke. The words felt like a prayer answered. He's stable. He's going to be okay. She didn't realize she was crying until her knees went weak. The nurse smiled gently. You can see him soon. When she finally did, Evan was asleep again, breathing steadily, a faint smile tugging at his lips. She sat beside him and whispered, You're not allowed to scare me like that again. His eyes fluttered open just enough to meet hers. Then you'll have to stay close enough to stop me next time. She laughed softly through tears. I'll hold you to that. Outside, the dawn began to break. It painted the horizon with the same colors that had followed them through every chapter: blue, gold, a touch of pink. Hope. If this part touched you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. Share your thoughts about Lila and Evan's journey below. Every comment helps this story reach more hearts like yours. 3 months passed after Evan's surgery, and the rhythm of life slowly found its calm again. The construction site had reopened, the sound of drills and laughter filling the air once more. Evan returned on lighter duties, and every morning Lila brought him coffee with a tiny heart drawn on the lid. The twins had started calling her Miss Sunshine, and soon enough they stopped adding the Miss. They were simply a family. But even in peace, life likes to whisper surprises. It was late autumn when Evan stood at the edge of the park, watching Lila push the twins on the swings. The golden leaves danced around her hair like they recognized her joy. He held something in his pocket, a small velvet box that had been sitting in his drawer for weeks. He had bought it one rainy evening, thinking of her laughter, her patience, and the way she made ordinary days feel like home. He wanted to wait for the perfect moment, but sometimes the perfect moment isn't quiet. It's real, messy, alive. So he called out, Lila. She turned, a little breathless from running with the girls. What is it? He smiled, heart pounding. Can you come here a second? The twins giggled. Daddy's got that funny look again. When she reached him, she noticed his shaking hands. You're nervous, she said softly. Only because I've never done this before and because I don't want to mess it up. Mess what up? She asked, eyes narrowing in playful suspicion. He took a deep breath, then dropped to one knee right there in the park. Gasps erupted from the playground. The twins froze mid-swing, their mouths open in delight. Lila Summers, he began, voice trembling. You walked into my life when I was certain I had nothing left to give. You didn't just love me. You loved my girls, my grief, my chaos. You brought laughter back into a home that had forgotten what it sounded like. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Evan. He opened the box. Inside was a simple silver ring. Nothing flashy, just elegant and true. Will you marry me? The world seemed to pause. Even the wind held still, listening. Then she nodded, tears streaming down her cheeks. Yes, she whispered. Yes, of course I will. The twins squealed so loudly that half the park turned to watch. Daisy and Hope ran to them, wrapping their tiny arms around both adults. We told you she'd say yes, Hope shouted, and the crowd burst into laughter and applause. Lila looked at Evan, still kneeling. You realize you've just given these two bragging rights for life, he chuckled. Wouldn't have it any other way. It was the kind of day the heart keeps forever. The wedding came quietly a few months later, a small ceremony in their backyard under twinkling fairy lights. Daisy and Hope wore matching lavender dresses and carried baskets of white rose petals. In the corner, one empty chair was adorned with a single white rose, their mother's presence felt, not forgotten. As Lila walked down the path, her eyes met Evan's, and the world around them disappeared. When they joined hands, the officiant's voice was steady but soft. Today isn't about replacing love, he said. It's about expanding it. Evan's vows were simple. You came into my life through a storm, he said, voice breaking. But you taught me that storms aren't endings, They're the sky making room for sunlight. Lila smiled through tears. You think I rescued you, but it was you and the girls who saved me. You reminded me that family isn't always something we're born into. It's something we build with courage and kindness. When they kissed, the twins threw petals into the air, laughing as they rained down around them. And for a moment, time stood still. That night, after everyone left, Evan and Lila sat by the porch steps watching the stars. The fairy lights blinked lazily, and the sound of the girls' soft giggles drifted from inside. Do you ever think she's watching? Lila asked quietly. He nodded. Every day, and I think she's grateful I didn't stay broken. She leaned her head against his shoulder. And do you ever worry we won't make it? He smiled faintly. Only when I forget that we already have. The next morning, the twins ran into their room holding a tray, burnt toast, scrambled eggs, and juice. Breakfast in bed for the newlyweds, Daisy announced. Lila groaned. You're going to spoil us. Evan laughed. They already have. That day became the first page of the rest of their story. A quiet life filled with small miracles, shared laughter, and new beginnings born out of old pain. But as every good story knows, peace doesn't mean the end. It means the start of something deeper. One evening, while sorting through an old storage box, Lila found a dusty envelope addressed to whoever loves them next. It was from Emily, Evan's late wife. The letter was dated 3 months before her passing. Hands trembling, Lila sat beside Evan and opened it. Inside were neat lines written in soft, careful handwriting. If you're reading this, the letter began, then someone out there has brought warmth back into their lives. Please don't see me as a shadow. I want their laughter to echo again. Love them fully. They deserve it. Lila's tears fell freely as she looked at Evan. He closed his eyes, whispering, She always knew what to say. Do you think she meant it? Lila asked softly. He nodded. She always did. They sat in silence, the letter between them, and for the first time since she had entered his life, the past didn't feel like a wound. It felt like a bridge, one that connected love lost to love found. If you've followed this story until now, thank you. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe so you never miss stories that remind us that love doesn't always come easy, but it always comes when we need it most. A full year passed after their wedding. The seasons changed gently around them, each one bringing its own quiet joys. The house that once echoed with the sound of tools and tired sighs now sang with laughter, piano notes, and the occasional crash of a toppled cereal bowl. Evan built a small studio in the backyard, half workshop, half sanctuary, where the twins painted cardboard castles while Lila worked on sketches for a children's book she was finally brave enough to start. It was called The Day the Rain Found Sunshine, inspired by the story of a coffee shop, a missed date, and 2 little girls who refused to let love fade away. Every morning before the twins went to school, they would run to that old tree house behind the house, the one Evan built years ago when the world felt smaller and sadder. It was different now. The wooden sign that once read Mommy's Angels had been repainted in 4 colors. It now said, Our Forever Home. Sometimes Lila would climb up after them, sit on the floor with her knees drawn up, and look at the old photograph of Emily that still hung on the wall. She never took it down. Instead, she added a new photo right beside it, a picture of all 4 of them, smiling in front of the treehouse. The past and present standing side by side, neither erasing the other. One evening, the twins came running to the porch, breathless and bright-eyed. Mom, Dad, come see the sky. They pointed upward. The sunset had spilled colors across the horizon, gold melting into rose, fading into blue. Evan lifted Hope onto his shoulders while Daisy leaned into Lila's arms. Looks like a painting, Lila whispered. Looks like a promise, Evan replied. And then, softly, as if the wind carried it for her, Lila said, "Do you ever think about how it all started? The coffee shop, the phone call, the rain?" He laughed under his breath. "You mean the date I never showed up for?" "Exactly." "I think about it every day," he admitted. "Because if that day hadn't gone wrong, I might never have found everything that finally went right." Their hands found each other, fingers interlacing like roots of the same tree. Later that night, when the twins were asleep, Lila stepped outside alone. The moonlight draped itself across the garden like silver silk. She closed her eyes and listened. To the crickets, to the soft hum of life, to the echo of everything they had survived. And somewhere in the stillness, she thought she heard Emily's voice. Not as a ghost, but as a gentle memory saying, "Thank you for loving them." A tear slipped down Lila's cheek, but it wasn't from sorrow. It was gratitude, pure, full, and quiet. She went back inside, where Evan was asleep on the couch, a book fallen open on his chest. She tucked a blanket around him, brushed a strand of hair from his forehead, and whispered, "You kept your promise." The story could have ended there, with peace, with love, with the warmth of a family rebuilt from brokenness. But life, as it often does, had one more gift to give. 6 months later, Lila stood on the porch again, this time with trembling hands holding a small white stick. The faintest pink line stared back at her. She laughed and cried at the same time, covering her mouth. When Evan walked out moments later, she turned the stick toward him. "Looks like the universe isn't done with us yet," she said through happy tears. He blinked, stunned, then pulled her into his arms. "Are you serious?" She nodded, laughing. "Completely." The sound he made was half laughter, half sob. He knelt, his hands gently resting on her belly. "Guess we'll need to make room in the tree house." The news filled the house with new energy. The twins danced in circles, shouting, "We're getting a baby." They began making plans, names, nursery colors, who would share their toys. Daisy announced she'd teach the baby to paint, while Hope declared she'd teach them how to make the best chocolate pancakes in the world. Months later, on a warm spring morning, the cry of a newborn echoed through the same hospital that had once held their tears and fears. This time it carried joy so bright it filled every hallway. Lila held the baby close, her face flushed with exhaustion and wonder. Evan sat beside her, tears slipping silently down his cheeks. "What do we call her?" he whispered. Lila smiled faintly. "Grace, because that's what brought us here." He nodded, his heart too full to speak. The girls peeked into the room, wide-eyed and awed. "She's so small," Daisy whispered. "Yeah," Hope added, "but she's already part of us." And she was. Years from now, when Grace would climb that same old treehouse, she'd find 2 photographs waiting for her, the mother who started it all, and the family who carried her love forward. Lila would sometimes watch from the kitchen window as all 3 children played under the tree's shade, Evan fixing something nearby, sunlight catching his hair. And she'd think, maybe love doesn't come on time, but it always comes exactly when it's meant to. Because that's what their story had taught her, that sometimes life falls apart just to make space for something more beautiful to grow. And as the soft voice of the narrator fades, her words linger. Love isn't a perfect beginning. It's a collection of second chances, stitched together by courage, forgiveness, and the willingness to believe again. So if you're listening to this, wherever you are, remember, your story isn't over yet. Sometimes it just needs a little rain to find its sunshine. Soft instrumental music rises, gentle piano, warm strings, fading into birdsong. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to this channel. Tell us in the comments what moment moved you most. Was it the coffee shop, the the twins' laughter, the proposal, or that final quiet grace. Your support helps more hearts find stories like this one. Until next time, stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember, love always finds its way home.